conectado desde la sala de videoconferencia de la Facultad de Económicas de la UNED con Daniele Ganser, historiador suizo y profesor de la Universidad de Basilea y autor del libro Los ejércitos secretos de la OTAN, la operación Gladio y el terrorismo en Europa Occidental. Y por eso le entrevistamos hoy aquí, para saber qué fue la operación Gladio y cómo se desarrolló en nuestro país, ya que el libro contiene un capítulo dedicado al mismo. I'm going to ask you a group of questions. The first are going to be about Gladio in general, and the history and so on. And then I want to talk about Gladio in Spain, about your chapter of Gladio in Spain. So maybe we can talk first about the general things about Gladio in Europe. And so what is Gladio? What's the definition of Gladio? And what are the secret armies of the NATO?
So the word Gladio is actually used as a name for the Italian secret army, which operated in Italy during the Cold War. Gladio was discovered in 1990, first time in Italy, and then Italian members of the secret army said that similar secret armies existed in all countries of Western Europe. The Italian Prime Minister, Giulio Andreotti, at the time explained that the name Gladio was secret for a long time. Nobody knew about it. And it was the name for a stay-behind army, which meant it was a network of soldiers who waited for a Soviet invasion. That was one of the main ideas. And the other thing was that they tried to manipulate the Italian political system in the absence of a Soviet invasion.
I would like to know if it was financed by the CIA and coordinated by NATO. Where did the money came from?
Well, the idea for the network was an American and a British idea. Washington and London at the beginning of the Cold War were scared that in Western Europe communist parties or at sometimes socialist parties would come to power. And in Italy we had very strong communist parties, and in France we also had strong communist parties. And so they set up these networks, and so the money in the beginning came from the CIA, the American Central Intelligence Agency, which is the foreign secret service of the US, and much of the training came from the British, the MI6, the British Foreign Secret Service. So really it was the CIA and the MI6 together working in Italy and instructing the secret soldiers of the Gladio units. The coordination of the stay-behind armies was managed through NATO. So we had a secret branch within NATO, which was called the Allied Clandestine Committee, ACC. And in this ACC, the representatives of the Gladio in Italy, people from the CIA, people from the MI6, but also from all the other NATO countries, that's from Norway or Denmark or France or Germany, they met and sat together to discuss what to do with the secret armies.
So how did the secret soldiers receive orders? There were hierarchical direct orders, or there was freedom of action?
There was a hierarchical structure because in Italy, for instance, you have the defense ministry, and within the defense ministry you have the military secret service. And within the military secret service there was a sub-branch, which is that Gladio branch. So it was really integrated as a secret element within the military secret service. It was not part of the army. It was part of the military secret service, but in the sense that people who were working in these networks, they were private people. They didn't consider themselves to be working for the state. Some, and that is the delicate thing, were from the extreme right-wing groups like Avanguardia Nazionale or Ordine Nuovo. These people in Italy were fascists convinced that they had to fight communism because they thought the communists are atheists, and they hated the atheists very much. They were devout Catholics, and they didn't want that the communists come into power. So these people were supported by the United States and by Great Britain in order to keep that delicate balance of power in Italy and in other countries in such a way that the left would not gain too much influence.
So you mean that there were two different kind of Gladio soldiers, like two groups of Gladio soldiers, like the ones that were prepared to act in a possible USSR invasion, and others that were terrorist, fascist.
That is the delicate thing, you know. That is really the most complicated question to answer. It is true. All of these secret soldiers say, we just waited for the Soviet invasion. That is not a criminal thing to do. I mean, these people just thought, in case Italy or France or Germany or Switzerland or Greece, in case any of these countries is going to be occupied, okay, then we come into action. We don't do anything if there's no invasion. So that is a first group, that is correct. But then there's another group, and that is also correct, which was more interested to fight the political fight in the country. There is a general, an Italian general, who commanded the Gladio network in the 1970s, and his name is Gerardo Serravalle. And he explains in a book that when the CIA came to the training center, they had a training center on an island off the Italian coast. And the gladiators were trained there. And then when the CIA came, the General Serravalle explained to the CIA, you know, we have arms caches in hidden places, so in case of the Soviet invasion, we're ready and everything. And then he explains that the CIA was not so interested in their preparations for a Soviet invasion. They were much more interested, he says, in what they can do to influence the Italian political system. So in case there were large protest movements, would they could break a protest movement, or would they could carry out destabilization operations. And that is a very delicate thing with the NATO secret armies, because we now know that some members of the Italian right wing, they came forward and they said, yes, this secret network existed, and yes, I knew of it, and I cooperated with it. And I carried out terrorist attacks, which were then blamed on the communists or on the other groups on the left, and this helped to destabilize Italy. Vincenzo Vinciguerra is there the most important source. He then went to jail, but in jail he explained, you know, NATO covered us. We could carry out terrorist attacks in Italy. And then we were flown, some of us, to Spain during the Franco dictatorship. That was a safe haven. And then we were flown to another country. So it's a very delicate thing.
For example, after I will ask you about the Italian fascist terrorists that came to Spain. But for example, Ali Akka, the person that tried to kill John Paul II. I think you, in your book, in your chapter about Turkey, you talk also about his organization. Was he? Can we say that he was also a stay-behind soldier?
In Turkey, we have also a group of people who belong to the Grey Wolves, which was a very nationalist and sometimes militant part of Turkish establishment. And these people, some of them worked in the stay-behind networks. But it is very difficult to say, this person we know for sure was a member of the Turkish secret army, and this person is just a freelance terrorist. I mean, that is very difficult to say, because we don't have the lists of all the people who worked in the secret armies. The military secret services only confirmed, yes, we had secret armies, yes, they were equipped with explosives, yes, they were equipped with weapons, yes, they were trained by the CIA, yes, they were trained by MI6, yes, they were linked to NATO, and NATO was in command. But whenever we try, as historians, to talk to NATO and tell them we need documents, were these people involved in terrorism? When we try to talk to the CIA and say we need more documents, were you linked to acts of terrorism in Europe? I mean, then the CIA said we're not going to comment, and NATO says the same thing, we're not going to comment, because it is still today unspeakable almost to say that there was CIA-linked terrorism in Europe. So it is ongoing research. We know that acts of terrorism were carried out, and we know that many people, including in Turkey and in Italy, who were involved in these acts of terrorism say the Americans and the British covered us. They wanted us to carry out these acts of terrorism, but it's very difficult to prove.